Inside Black and Gold, Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak getting ready for week 8. Is it really week 8? I feel aged beyond my years watching this 3-4 football team as they trudge into a matchup against another 3-4 ball club at Indianapolis. It hasn't been pretty football, Jeff, and I think we kind of talked a little bit about it before getting on the pod. Like being home this weekend too, we saw a lot of other teams play bad football as well.
Yeah, and I know people don't want to hear it because the Saints have been among the worst of the bad over the last 4 or 5 weeks, right? With the Patriots game notwithstanding. Like if you eliminate the Patriots game, the last 4 games have been fugly. But you look at teams like the Bills, like the Bills, I think they're in worse shape than the Saints, considering they have their quarterback. And the Chargers, for example, like they have the quarterback and no one's questioning whether he's the guy, but so what's going on, right? Anyway, so we'll get into that in the final segment. I want to kind of reset. We did it a couple weeks ago, and I think it's another good opportunity to kind of reset. In terms of when we talked about it 2 weeks ago, it was like, oh well, they should have a good chance to beat the Texans and Jaguars, so they didn't do that. So now we are looking at, okay, how do you get to 10 wins now? So I think that's kind of where you look at the last, the final 10 games, and you say, okay, where are the losses? Where can they afford to lose a game, and where do they have to win in order to get to 10 wins? And so we'll kind of go through that, look at the last 10 weeks of the schedule. And the second segment I want to dive into is Derek Carr the problem? Like seriously, let's look at it. Michael Thomas is out there sending tweets, throwing his quarterback under the bus, whether they did that intentionally or not. That's what it was. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what really happened on that play that everyone keeps talking about, and kind of, why has Derek Carr seemingly just not been who as advertised? What are we looking at? So we're going to dive into that in the second segment because there's a lot to talk about there. But in the first segment, I want to kind of catch up with Dennis Allen. Talked on Monday. Anyone who, has been paying attention probably isn't surprised by the fact that he came out today and said, no, they will not be making any staff changes. And if they change their mind, they'll let us know, which fantastic. Thanks, DA. I was worried that you might fire somebody and not tell anyone, and we'd have to figure it out based on who's standing there holding a clipboard. But, so it shouldn't surprise anyone. But hey, maybe you thought, oh, well, there's a 10-day break like I did. And you'd be like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to maybe make some changes. You had Ronald Curry standing up in the locker room at halftime against the Jags and making a speech to the team, which doesn't usually happen. So maybe that's a sign of, frustration on his part. But if you thought that was going to be the nail in the coffin of Pete Carmichael, you are incorrect. He is eternal. And the Saints are not planning on making any changes. And that's, to a certain extent, I understand it because, again, like I said before, like this is a pass-fail class, I think, for this coaching staff. And if you can't figure it out with the people in the building, then you're probably going to get fired anyway. So you might as well just ride it out. Like, I don't know. And again, like we talked about this, like Ronald Curry is in this offense already. It's not like the offense is going to change because he gets the clipboard in his hand and the play sheet in his hand. But maybe it sparks things. But either way, it looks like we're going to get more of the same in terms of Pete Carmichael leading this offense. And who knows? Maybe defies logic and they'll be able to get things going. But not particularly inspiring. Let's put it that
way. It's so darn frustrating because it wasn't supposed to be like this. They made the big move to bring a quarterback in. There was, I guess, some concerns over the Derek Carr signing when it happened. It doesn't look like it's working out. We're just, you want to say just 7 games into the season, but it's a pretty good sample size at this point. I don't know what you're waiting on. We talk about communication, execution.
Games, right? 24 games with Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. It's not like this is small. That's not a small sample size. That's a pretty solid sample size, in my opinion.
No, and yeah, that's the problem too. It's like the offense doesn't look really any different from a year ago.
I think it looks worse, if we're being honest. I don't see. Yeah, I mean, because you would expect it to be more effective in terms of at least the players in it independent of Derek Carr, have all been in it. Like, it's not like this is a team settling into a new offense. If you had changed the play, that's my problem with the whole growing pains line. If you had changed the play call and you had made changes independent of the quarterback, that should be, at least somewhat in line with what you would, that should be above replacement level, right? Then you could understand some of these issues, but it's not. It's the same coaching staff. It's the same scheme. It's the same receivers, same running backs, but mostly. At least from what we've seen thus far, right? Like this last game, it was basically all Alvin Kamara for a few reasons that we'll get to in a second. But so here's what Dennis Allen actually said beyond, obviously he said no, they won't be making changes, but he was also asked, what he thinks about the people in the building, and then also, whether growing pains should be out of the question at this point. And so here's that.
Did you determine any substantial changes in coaching staff, personnel, or anything that will be noticed right away?
No. We'll, if we decide to make some changes, we'll let you know. But
do you find that it's easier to make the adjustments with the same group instead of adding new variables and things like that? Like, is that an easier thing to try to address?
Well, yeah. You get in the middle of the season, and there's generally not a lot of people from outside your building that are coming in that are going to make, significant changes. So we've got our guys, and we're going to be hard at work at trying to fix some issues.
Like little elves.
Like little Keebler elves. He was also asked about, so he keeps saying, the growing pains line. And so I think, I don't think this team is going to make significant changes. I think you're just going to ride it out, as frustrating as that sounds. But he did say this, which I think you're kind of getting closer to that, lane where he says, I think it's time for those to be done with in terms of growing pains. And then he's asked, okay, what if they're not? What if you continue to see this? And he says, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And it's not exactly, inspiring to hear, but it does sound like they're getting close to making at least personnel changes, at least changes for what's happening on the field. And I don't know how many of those you can make. I do think there are some concerns in terms of the attitude of some of the players, some of the skill position players. I don't think that's the biggest issue this team has, but it's definitely there. Like that's one of my issues is there's this idea that it's either one thing or another thing, right? That like there's one major problem and you fix that and suddenly everything is better. It would be so much easier if that was the case, but there are levels, right? Like Chris Olave is route running in terms of, going 100% on all of his routes is an issue. Is it the biggest issue? Probably not, but it is an issue. Like, it's not like he's right or Derek's wrong. They're both in the wrong in some respect. And we'll get into that more in the next segment, but like, there's a lot to fix. And that's why earlier in the year, I don't think changing the play call is going to solve all the problems of this offense. I think it is performative to some extent. I just think the performance is necessary at a certain point. And, you just kind of got to prove you're serious about winning, in my opinion. And I don't think they've done that yet. But yeah, there's so many things on this offense that haven't gone right that you're just trying to find, the root cause. And unfortunately, I think there's too many root causes to fix in one fell swoop of saying, oh, get rid of this guy. Suddenly it's fixed. I don't know.
No, it's curious because I think the last time we were mentioning that, you want to try and change some things to find out what the exact issue is, so you got to change one variable, right? So is it going to be the play caller first or is it going to be the quarterback?
Yeah. Because, like that. Yeah. From a problem solving perspective, we all took algebra, right? Like there's variables and you got to figure out which, got to tinker and change variables and figure out what works and what doesn't, right? We talked about oh, you're having nightmares about your algebra days?
I'm just thinking of suddenly now we've put putting math equations into our a football podcast.
Yeah, X equals
right.
drops. Anyway, but Yeah, so like they've gotten more out of Taysom Hill, right? And like the variable is you put Taysom Hill into the equation, and suddenly he runs faster than Juwan Johnson, and so your timing on certain plays is wrong, and then you kind of look at it. But there's you bring Jamal Williams back, you bring Kendre Miller into the mix, but how much does that improve your offense? Like some people complaining, like, okay, so here's a couple bits and news, right? So the Saints, Dennis Allen said today that Kendre Miller aggravated his shoulder in the pregame. So he was limited in that game. So that's why he only got 3 snaps, right?
What are we doing pregame that dudes are getting hurt?
I don't know, but it's unfortunate. Jamal Williams was on a pitch count, which isn't a surprise. Like they're not going to tell you that in advance because why would that doesn't benefit them to tell you that Jamal Williams is only going to get X number of snaps. But he was on a pitch count. Dennis Allen confirmed that today. So losing Kendre Miller in the pregame meant the majority of the action is going to go to Alvin Kamara. And I had at least one person say like, oh, why didn't they do something else? And why didn't they incorporate Chris Olave more into the backfield and get Taysom Hill more action at the running back position? And because I don't think that would have I don't think less Alvin would have been the solution in that game, right? You had 10 days off after the game. Sure, Alvin was probably tired at the end of it, but I don't think that having him on the field was the problem. But it's just like these are variables, right? You don't know how things would have looked if you had a full allotment of Jamal. I think Jamal didn't look particularly good in general. Hopefully it's just a rust thing and he can shake some of that off. But it's like there's just so many moving parts that it's hard to identify what will solve problems. I thought the penalties weren't as big of an issue in that game. There was one bad pass interference. I know they had one holding penalty, but this is a team that leads the NFL in penalty yardage against, or at least they did going into week 7. I haven't double checked to see where they stand now, but going into that week, they led the NFL in penalty yardage against and holding penalties. And I think they had one of each. So in terms of a long pass interference penalty and a holding penalty, but I think that would be below their average because they had 10 holding penalties going into that game, which is more than one per game, obviously, which is, more math if you want to do that. So I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here and like paint a rosy picture because I don't think that it is a rosy picture. I think that this team is getting really close to falling. I think that you're very close to this season going down the tubes, and feels like a very keep doing what you're doing type situation, right? And I don't know, it feels rudderless.
No, and when you mentioned too the Jamal Williams being back didn't look like he didn't look comfortable at all, right? And
didn't look like it was solving any problems. Let's put it that way.
He's just someone too. I've been waiting to see how he's going to mesh with this offense because we really just haven't seen him. I haven't seen Jamal Williams do his thing, I guess you could say. And he came into the year, and the one thing I thought was key from him was talking about how everyone thinks they know, who I am, what kind of running back I am. I can't wait to show you. And I'm still waiting to see it right now. Mr. Pokemon needs to evolve or whatever it is.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like going in. Yeah. You heard, okay, I'm going to show you the running back that I am, whatever. Right now I'd settle for a good short yardage running back. Like that's all I need. Cause I don't think they have one right now outside of Taysom Hill and Colin Saunders being that fullback, which I think I think that's a good thing to have. I think that'll help them down the road in terms of, you want to play smash mouth football on the goal line, and that's a way you can do it. If you don't need a fullback, saves your roster spot, right. So
Saunders has been getting a ton of love through national media, even everywhere.
He should. Good for him, right? But yeah, it's a whole thing. The other news that came out of today, if you want to call it news, there is optimism that Juwan Johnson will play this week. Take that for what it is. I'm not sure. I mean, calf injury that keeps you out a month that you didn't think was going to keep you out of even the game where you injured yourself prior to it. Very strange to me, but hopefully he gets back because, I do think that he is a piece in this offense, right? Like if Juwan Johnson is healthy and in that game, is he the one you're throwing to at the back of the end zone? A guy with I would argue more reliable hands than Foster Moreau, maybe, right? If Taysom Hill, if he's in there, is he the one that you're trying to hit on that out? Probably, right? And so You can't say that he hasn't been wasn't used when he was healthy. So I don't know why it would change now, but they have been trying to incorporate the tight end position more in the last few weeks, and they haven't had Juwan. So maybe that's something that you can unlock in the middle of the field with a more reliable pass catcher than Taysom Hill. So hey, maybe that's something.
There's many Hoodats, including ESPN Stan Verrett, who was on with Deuce and Hoss, and there's people looking for still Jimmy Graham. They want to know where he's at too.
Yeah, I mean, I've given up in terms of if they're not going to use Jimmy Graham the last 2 weeks, why would they start using him now? If you're not going to use him when Juwan's not out there, why would you start using him now that he's back? Right? How many games do you have? Like, I can't remember prior to this game, maybe, what was the last game that ended with, down a touchdown in the red zone, or at least close to the red zone. They were at the 24-yard line against the Texans. Like, in terms of just 4 shots at the end zone that failed, right? Like, prior to that, when was the last time that happened? Like, it doesn't happen that often, at least not in that exact scenario where it's like, okay, no, time isn't really a factor.
Right.
You have a timeout. You have all the, like, you're just taking your best shot at the end zone. And it has happened in back-to-back weeks. Like, it wasn't like they got bogged down at midfield. Like, I remember, like, the Bengals game last year is kind of a similar example, but they never got past midfield. Like, these were both instances where you got down the field, and all you needed to do was have that drive end in the end zone to tie the game and give yourself a shot in overtime, and you failed all 8 times. And like that scenario doesn't come up that often. It's come up in back-to-back weeks. And the guy that you brought in specifically to be a red zone target hasn't been involved. So if you're not going to use him, then when? So I don't know. I've given up on the idea that maybe there's a Jimmy Graham option here, and I wouldn't be surprised if when you bring Juwan back, he gets cut or he's inactive at the very least. Because what is he really providing?
Absolutely zero, nada.
Right, literally. I mean, well, he's been blocking. He has been on the field. He has served a role.
Right.
But in the passing game specifically, nothing. And if you're an opposing team, why are you even guarding him?
It's just wild to think that we're 7 games in, he's gotten 2 targets and 1 was a catch for a touchdown
in the red zone. All right, one of your few touchdowns in the red zone went to him. Yeah, so
it's just odd and makes you scratch your head kind of thing. Obviously, I'm not saying I'm an NFL play caller here, but it just seems like common sense.
See, again, I don't like. I'm not even sure if it would have worked if they had tried it, but like, I wish I could sit here and say, yeah, they tried it, and it didn't work. Like,
so I know it didn't work.
You're running fades to the end zone anyway, and you're throwing them to Chris Olave, a guy who is a very good wide receiver, but I would not argue is a guy I think is at his best when he's trying to fight with somebody. Like, he's gotten better at contested catches, but I would not in any world say that he is an elite contested catch player.
No, I'd have to go to throw it to Graham or freaking Mike T at least.
Well, they did try to throw to Mike. Like, they have been
right.
like they have been trying to incorporate Mike, but not over the middle of the field. It's been the edges of the field. Why? I don't know. Like, have you seen a whole lot of slants? Because I haven't.
No, which is crazy considering, the whole big fight between him and CJ Gardner-Johnson was supposedly over the Slant Boy nickname. And we haven't seen Slant Boy at all. We'd die for Slant Boy right now.
Yeah. They would be so much better off if he was playing right into that nickname, but for whatever reason, they're not. And I don't know how much of that is on Pete. I don't know how much of that is on Derek. But let's wrap this segment up. We can get into more of the Derek Carr trash,
yeah,
in the next segment, because there's a lot to complain about, and we're gonna dive into it. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. This fun, rosy podcast is brought to you by my state of mind, which is bleak. All right, y'all. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Check us out on YouTube at WWL Sports. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at I'm sorry, no, that's not right. At Saints_pod. And if you listen to these on Apple and you haven't subscribed, you haven't give us a rating or a review, tell us what you think. Would very much appreciate it if you do that. As always, just appreciate all the feedback. It helps us get better at our podcast. So anytime we see those, I check at least once a week to see if there's any new ones on there. Make sure to do that. Otherwise, keep listening because we will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes or so complaining about Derek Carr because I think he earned it.
A whole segment.
Yes. But like in part because, we talked about this last episode, and one of the reasons that, and you said you understood the frustration coming off the field. And I understand the level of frustration that goes into a football game when things aren't going right and you're angry, whatever. There's a level to which you can express that. And like if you're Peyton Manning, you're Tom Brady, whatever, you're the GOAT, you've won Super Bowls, and you're typically going to be the one that's doing the right thing and playing really well, and then so guys let you down and you tell them about it, right? When you're playing the way Derek Carr has played over the first 7 weeks of the season, don't do that. Don't act like the only problem is that someone's not running his route the exact right way, because you're part of the problem anyway. And so, like, you come off the field, and one of the reasons, one of the reasons you can't do that is because you know why everyone has spent the past 4 or 5 days dissecting one unsuccessful play that otherwise it wasn't even like the final drive. It was like an early drive in the fourth quarter. But the reason everyone's talking about one play, not even the pick six that you threw, is because you threw a temper tantrum coming off the field. And now that is a flashbulb moment for this offense's dysfunction. And so you have internet sleuths and all the breakdown people looking at it and saying, well, what was supposed to happen? This is the play. It's supposed to go to the out. Why did he throw it 10 yards into the bench? Why did Ugo Amadi catch this pass? And then he comes off yelling at Chris Olave, right? And so, we've heard basically input from everybody. So why not me? And so, the question is, there are a few questions, right? One is, was he throwing to Chris Olave? And I think what we have heard from Dennis Allen, what we have heard from Mike Thomas, which we're going to get to in a second, Deuce McAllister said this too, that play is designed to go to the out, right? That play is designed for Chris Olave to clear up field and the out to come in underneath it. It was tighter than it should have been because Chris Olave didn't run the route the way it was supposed to be run in terms of going 100% the entire way through. Now, should he have still thrown the ball to the out, Derek? Probably. But the bigger issue is that he didn't go through his progression at all. And people are saying, well, why did he decide to throw it to Chris? I don't think he decided to throw it to Chris. I think what happened, which is a disturbing trend and also happened against the Texans, is a play got screwed up. And rather than continuing on and being a quarterback, Derek Carr got frustrated and threw the ball out of bounds, 10 yards out of bounds. And people are like, well, why are you buying this idea that he threw the ball away? Because it's pretty obvious. He just reared back and threw it as far as he could out of bounds. But you have to make it at least convincing, right? Like what he did against the Texans, when I think it was Mike Thomas who he had a miscommunication with, he just chucked the ball to nobody and got a grounding penalty. The same thing happened on this play. The difference is you have to make it convincing that you are throwing to somebody so that you don't get a grounding penalty. So this time, instead of just dumping it into the turf and taking that penalty, threw it out of bounds. So I think he did that. And Dennis Allen said he threw it away. And here, let's look at Mike Thomas and I need to express that this is not normal. Do you have a wide receiver going on social media and effectively throwing his quarterback under the bus? Because that's what happened. So, and I think this is a little confusing if there's a few things that might be confusing to people. So let's read it. Exactly. He's replying to a Nick Underhill tweet basically that says, Chris Olave is not an option on that play. If his defender falls down and he's standing alone, maybe, but otherwise he's not even a check on that play because Mike Thomas agrees with that and says his only job is to collision the outside shoulder of the defender, which basically means, I think Dennis Allen referred to it as a bus ticket release or a must outside release. Like the only thing you can do wrong is get to the inside shoulder and obviously stop running, which is what Olave did. But, his job there is to get to the outside shoulder and carry that guy upfield. Like he is not a check He says he's never even the throw. He's not even an alert. It's if they're playing a certain coverage, like in certain instances, you'd be like, okay, that's the alert. Rashid Shaheed has that on several route concepts where if they're playing a certain coverage, he's the alert and you go there, even though that's not where the initial progression was. That's not the case on this play. Chris Olave is only a clear out. So Derek's not going there with the ball. He's throwing the ball away because he is frustrated at his young wide receiver for doing, again, what we have seen and complained about, which is him not going 100% on the clear out. So, and Mike it concedes that point here and says the only advice I would give him is to take the ball and know Taysom runs fast, so he has to run even faster to clear it out, right? So that is Mike saying, yes, Chris did not go full speed on this route, which is, obviously that's a mistake, but it's not a bad enough mistake that you should be just dumping the play on third down and going into a tirade against your wide receiver. So, and the the part where he throws Derek under the bus here, he says the progression is 7, 22, 13. And the important part is eyes only went to 7, right? So I think Derek Carr was keyholing the out, right? And with that, I mean, that's the only place he's looking is the out. And he sees the clear out not being run correctly, and he throws it out of bounds. Now, like you can say he should have made that throw to Taysom, but, and I'll show you the screenshot here, which you're correct. He should have thrown that ball to Taysom. But when you look at it and you can say, okay, was this run correctly? And I'll close this out. I'll lose the overlay so you can see it. So, yes, this ball is there to be thrown, right? Like you can see that you can make this throw. Like that's going to come open. But you have to, like, I see people have sent me this screenshot over and over again. And what you need to understand, and I'm not trying to vindicate Derek Carr here. I think Derek Carr has been a big problem, but he's not looking at this from the ceiling. He's looking at this and seeing way too many defenders in that area for what this play is supposed to be, right? You're seeing a defender that's not carried upfield as far as he should be and is looking back at the quarterback. You're seeing a linebacker still sitting in coverage, which, the way you can make this throw, but you probably have to lead it upfield a little farther. Like you can't just make that throw on a line or that linebacker is going to step in front of it. And so that's why when you're talking about the clear out not being done effectively, it's because if you did try to loft it over that linebacker and let it to a far upfield, you're going to bring the ball directly into where that defensive back is still looking at it. And he, maybe you probably could make that throw. You probably should make that throw at the NFL level. But the fact of the matter is the clear out was not run the right way. And that's what Derek Carr is reacting to and throwing it away. Now, I'm not telling you that's the right thing to do. I'm just telling you that's what he's looking at, and that's the decision he's making. And, fine. If you don't think you can make that throw, keep in mind he's already thrown a pick six in this game trying to squeeze a ball in, right? So I can understand the idea like that's a tight window. It's third down deep in your own territory. Another pick six does end the game. So, sure. That's more dangerous of a throw than you wanted it to be. Let's say, I think we can all agree on that it should have been a safer throw than it was. And that's what Derek's reacting to. But what he doesn't do is say, okay, it's not there. Why don't I look to Rashid? Okay, he's probably covered here. But then you have Mike Thomas. I'm sorry, this is Rashid. He's probably covered here. You have defender. But you have Mike Thomas coming in wide open on the backside of the post here. And so why aren't you going there? Why are you bailing on this play? At that point, I don't know. And to me, that's the bigger issue. And to me, him coming off the field and instead of just going over to Chris Olave and saying, hey, you can't do that. Like, and I get it. This is something that's been happening and there's frustration there. You want to know a quick way to get your receivers to not be on your side? To embarrass them on national television. And why do you think Mike Thomas feels the need to come out and defend his teammate on social media? Well, because he's getting berated on national television. And that's not what your quarterback is supposed to do. That's not like, and again, if you were performing at such a high level that the only reason some of these plays don't work is that your receivers are letting you down, that's one thing. That's not what's happening. If you go and you look at any of these breakdowns of Derek Carr's play, you'll see mistake after mistake after mistake. And like not mistakes that you would expect out of, actually mistakes that you would expect out of a young player, not a 10-year veteran, not a guy who, you brought in to lead this group at a higher level, right? You are getting nothing out of Derek Carr right now that you could not be getting out of Jameis Winston for a 10th of the price. And that's the problem. That's where this team is frustrating to watch, because you made all of these decisions. You made these bold proclamations that this was going to be the offense and this was the guy that you needed to lead it. Well, right now, it looks like your offense has taken a step back, and there is no one at fault for that more than the quarterback. And you can say it's Pete Carmichael. You can say it's Dennis Allen. You can say it's whatever. Your quarterback is not playing at an NFL level right now.
No, it's hard to defend Derek Carr in any way. And man, the tweet that, Mike T puts out there, and we kind of discussed it a little too previous, whether he meant to or not, that really it roasts Carr in that situation.
Well, and I think it shows you like the state of this locker room right now, which I don't think, it's like, I think we talked about this last time, and it's like, there are going to be cracks throughout the course of the season in terms of, this is the coaching staff's job. It's like you have things that develop, and you take it, you make sure you fix them, or you get out in front of them, and you keep everyone pulling in the same direction. And I think that's when you start to see, and like I've said this, like people will assume, oh, the locker room's falling apart. DA's losing the locker room, whatever. It's not that hard to spot when it actually happens. And when it happens, it's stuff like this that leaks out where you're just like, well, how did that happen? How was the coaching staff not out ahead of this? Why does Michael Thomas feel like he has to go out on social media and correct narratives about his young teammate who's getting roasted because his quarterback screamed at him on national television and forced everyone to take a closer look at exactly what happened on that play? Like there's questions to be asked about like the quality of the play, but there's also questions to be asked about the quality of the leadership that's going on in this locker room. And right now, I don't think it's good enough. And Derek Carr needs to seriously look himself in the mirror and say, I haven't been good enough. It's not about the second-year wide receiver not running his routes exactly like I want them to. Now, yes, and like I said in the last segment, it's not one thing. It's never just one thing. There's always a number of things that go into an offense not being successful, a team not being successful. It's not just, it's this guy's fault, it's that guy's fault. It's how does everyone get on the same page? And what you saw in that game is not like the offense got moving, and that's a good thing. And you can take some stuff out of that. And you can put it into the equation and say, okay, this worked. Do more of this, right? Run more hurry up. Get Alvin the ball in space. Run more screens, whatever. The offense needs to be a unit. And right now it's like Derek Carr's out there fighting with his receivers. And you want your teammates to play better, support them. Don't undermine them. And right now it just doesn't feel like that's happening. And so, it's got to, I'm not saying this all to say it's over. Tear it down. But I think you're getting dangerously close to this locker room falling apart. And you got, as a quarterback, as a coaching staff, you have to fix that. You have to find ways to mend that. And like you laughed, you joked last time about like, oh, maybe go out and have like a laser tag or mini golf or something. Like, yeah, it's a joke, but at the same time, why do you think they go spearfishing in the offseason? Right? Like, why do you think they do that stuff? Like, if you don't feel like you're on the same team as your teammates, you're not going to play good football. And that's got to be something that you fix.
No, and that's a huge concern that, obviously we see with that explosion from Carr. Obviously, it wasn't just that one play. It was everything that had been built up to that one moment. And for whatever reason, that was when he decided to get triggered to the extent where he overreacted for sure. I did say that I like the fact that I saw some emotion from the guy, but now it's turned into this, it's turned into a worse situation, I think, where it just makes his leadership now a question for this squad. And you got, Olave's not happy with him. Now Mike T is, going in the Twitter sphere, making these comments, and it just doesn't feel very inspiring.
No, there's emotion, but there, like, you can have emotion, but there's healthy emotional outbursts and there's unhealthy emotional outbursts in terms of team health, and you're not getting those. And it's funny, you sent this to me this morning, and Mike Freeman wrote a column about how there's a double standard when it comes to quarterbacking, and you know, where a white quarterback does that and doesn't get criticized, and a black quarterback does that and gets raked over the coals relentlessly. And I agree with it, because that's true. If Jameis Winston had done that, you would never hear the end of it. Now, I don't think it's fair in the sense that locally, I don't think that anyone's giving Derek Carr a pass. Like, I think Derek Carr is getting heavily criticized locally. And the question is, nationally, why isn't it louder in terms of people are criticizing Derek Carr's play per se, but you don't hear a lot of people coming in and saying like, well, where is the leadership here? Like, why is he berating his teammates on national television? And so I think that's kind of where you're at. Like, if that was Jameis, the talk show sphere, First Take, all these folks, they'd be talking about nothing else. And so I agree. There is a double standard when it comes to that. But I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily the main issue in play here in how Derek Carr needs to improve as a leader. The funny thing is, you look at it, and I think Derek Carr is very good at talking to the media. I think that and when you are good in that, like, that's part of being a quarterback. That's part of doing your job. And he's very good at it. He answers questions the right way. He strikes the right tone. But is he that good at communicating with his teammates and making sure that everyone is everyone's on the same side, right? Or does he make them feel like they're the villain of the scenario whenever something goes wrong? And right now, I think that's how Chris Olave feels, is that things aren't going perfectly for him, and he's the scapegoat of all of these problems. And should he be held to a high standard because he's such a talented player? Yes. But it shouldn't be his quarterback who's making him feel that way. So I don't know. That's the end of my rant. I just had to get that out.
It's like we have our own little, who needs reality television? We got our own soap opera going on right here.
Well, it's just frustrating because it's like, this is like, yeah, you have a rookie quarterback and you expect things to happen and you expect them to learn on the job and be like that. This is not supposed to be that way with a 10-year veteran. You're supposed to understand kind of the finer points of leading a locker room. And again, he's really good in the media. So you would listen to his press conferences and you're like, oh, you know what? Okay, I think he's got it. But then you see what happens on the field and you're like, I don't think he's got it. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope he can turn things around. And I hope that this was just an aberration and he and Chris Olave can just sit and play ping pong and be like, you know what, my bad. And you know, you're going to play for each other. Because right now it doesn't feel that way. And Mike Thomas, like Mike doesn't do anything by accident. Mike is a very calculated person.
That's why this tweet like blew me away.
Exactly. and so like, you're like, again, when people say, oh, he's losing a locker room, blah, 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 this and that, it's not that hard to spot. And this was not hard to spot. Right. And yeah, so I think that's like Derek Carr needs to first of all grow up and be the 30 some odd year old person that he is, and play like that. And also like seriously look at his own game, his own performances, because there are a lot of throws in that game that were not on the receivers. There are a lot of reads in that game that were not on the receivers that did not get made. And so if for this team to get better, Derek Carr has got to be better. And his teammates have to be better too. But it starts with the quarterback. It starts with the guy who has the ball in his hands on every play. And so hopefully that can be the case. Yeah,
like to me, like I said, I get the passion coming from Carr. Was it displayed improperly, I guess, because initially I didn't take it as such a bad look. But going back and looking at it more, I guess, you know, you say temper tantrum, and it kind of did look like very huffy puffy. I'm going to take my ball and head to the sideline, and I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm mad kind of thing.
Well, especially because like you could argue that he made worse mistakes on that play than Chris did. Like, it's not like that play was dead because Chris didn't run full speed. It was made more difficult because Chris didn't run full speed, but he bailed on it on third down.
He just gave up on the play, right?
On third down. It's not like this is first down at midfield where it's like, yeah, I just don't want to make a dangerous throw, so I'll live to play another down. They punted. And granted, that was Lou Hedsley's best punt of his life because it was the 62-yard punt.
Lou.
Still, yeah, that's another story. What a great. And again, like, there's a lot of things that are going wrong in this team. Let's put it that way. But the reason that everyone has spent the last 4 days talking about that specific play is
Yeah.
because of what Derek Carr did. And so like you gotta I've said it so many ways, I'm just repeating myself. It's like you gotta be better. And so hopefully he is. Hopefully this team kind of sees that as the issue that it is and fixes it.
No, you mentioned he's good at talking to the media. It'll be interesting, obviously, his Wednesday availability to see how that goes.
Yeah. And hopefully he's as good. He's as good talking to his teammates as he is to the media. That's all I have to say. But all right, let's wrap up that segment so I don't say anything that's going to get me in trouble. As I don't know if I have already. We'll find out. But hopefully, the car troop is going to come for me on Twitter. All the D cars in the establishment. But this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. And it's Steve Geller WWL. We're going to come back. We're going to kind of reset what the Saints are looking at over the final 10 games this season, and kind of talk about this. Like there's a lot of mid football teams out there, and that's one thing that was a benefit of this weekend was I got to appreciate that a bit more watching all these games in real time and watching the Commanders flail about as the Giants tried to give them that game and whatnot. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to stop ranting for a little while. And we're going to look ahead and we're going to see, exactly where the Saints are and where they have to go. First things first, let's reset the NFC South in particular.
Surprise.
Yeah. So one thing that's very clear is that this is going to be another season where who wants it? Because right now, no one seems to want it. The Bucs had a chance to kind of take command there this week, and they lost to the Falcons and looked bad doing it at home, 16-13. You talk about bad offense, right? The Saints are not the only team with an anemic offense right now. There's a lot of NFL teams with anemic offenses. The Panthers didn't play this week, but they only scored they didn't score that many fewer points than they would have if they had played. They're 0-6. The Saints are 3-4. The Bucs are 3-3. They're the only team, so the Bucs have already had their bye. So they have a long way to go with no bye. And so, yeah, Falcons are 4-3. They're in front of the division. They're the only winning team in the division right now. And I think that was the best case scenario for the Saints, just because the Saints have already lost to the Bucs.
Right.
And you want them to accrue as many losses as possible. The Saints have 2 games in hand against the Falcons. So,
exactly.
You always want to err on the side of controlling your own destiny. Who knows? Why would you assume that the Saints are going to beat the Falcons? But that is the best case scenario, that the Bucs lose to the Falcons so that you can go and beat the Falcons twice, and you still theoretically, like, if the Bucs were 2 games ahead of you and then you beat them, you would still only, you know what I mean? So I think for the purposes of where they are, even though they've lost 2 in a row, they're still a half or a game out of first.
Yeah, for a while it looked like, wow, this Falcons-Bucs game really could end up in a tie, but in the end, the Falcons pulled it out. Really, the Bucs really don't look impressive in anything, and it's amazing that they were able to come into New Orleans and really, on both sides, push the Saints around. That was definitely one of those performances that I couldn't fathom.
Yeah, well, I mean, who else hasn't looked impressive is the Saints. But you look around, look at the NFC in particular. So you have the Cowboys at 4-2. And I think we've said this is there's only 3 dominant teams in the NFL right now. The rest are all mid to upper mid to lower mid to bad. The Eagles and the 49ers in the NFC are those 2 teams. On the AFC side, the Chiefs, and maybe you could make an argument for somebody else. But right now, I don't really care about the AFC. I'm more looking at the NFC. I would have said the Lions until they went out and got destroyed by the Ravens. And so I think that, you start to question them a little bit.
It wasn't even like you said, a close game. They were just from the beginning to the end, and they just got mopped up.
They got annihilated. And the Ravens are another one of those weird teams. Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs had a good game, so that at least justified my fantasy pick. But yeah, so I think the Lions are probably right outside that group right now, and I think that game kind of showed you how, you know, that they still have a little ways to go before you can reliably say, like, yeah, they're a Super Bowl
They've
contender.
arrived.
But, you know, they're definitely a playoff team, especially when you look at the state of the NFC North. And I think that's kind of like, yeah, they're 5-1, but look at their division: Vikings 2-4, Packers 2-4, Bears 2-5. So, you know, like they're gonna waltz into the playoffs, and so it's for them, it's a matter of being at the top end, like peaking at the right time. But, you know, so Seahawks 4-2, Rams 3-4, Cardinals 1-6. They're in the bad category, right? We talked about the rest of the NFC North. I don't think any of them are going to be really in the conversation for a wild card, unless maybe the Vikings kind of turn things around. And then you have, you know, like when you look at the NFC North, the NFC South looks dominating, right? The Bucs are 3-3, 3-4. So I mean, realistically speaking, everything is in front of them in terms of the Saints. And I know that's so annoying, and I hate the fact that I just said that out loud, but that's what's made last year so frustrating. That's what's going to make this year so frustrating if you can't get things sorted out. Is there's nothing stopping you. It's not a mountain in front of you. It's like a step ladder, and all you got to do is like not kick yourself in the face as you're trying to step on top of it. And right now, that's what they've done.
No, and like you were saying, there's still so much in front of you, and even this week, the Saints they'll wrap up. This will be the last time they play an AFC opponent. From here on out, then you know you get into the real nitty gritty of all NFC teams, heavy duty more into NFC South opponents. So yeah, there's far from anything has been decided yet.
Yeah, their last 9 games are against NFC teams. So they're 1-2 in the NFC right now. They beat the Panthers, they lost to the Bucs and the Packers. So, yes, in the sense that, you know, best case scenario is you get things sorted out. And so just like last year, you win a good number of games down the stretch of the season, and those will be NFC games, which will help you in terms of tiebreakers, divisional. You know, you still have 5 division games left. I'm sorry. Yeah, 5 division games left. No, I'm sorry, 4. You have 1 against the Panthers, 1 against the Bucs, 2 against the Falcons.
Right.
And so, like, you're 1-1 in the division. You're still right there, and you should feel like you have a good chance to move forward. You just got to win some freaking games. But you look at, like, you want to say the Saints are alone. The Saints are not alone in having really awkward questions as it pertains to a team that you feel like should be better than it is. The Bills are 4-3. They should be 3-4, and they just lost to that team that the Saints blew out 34-0. Like, they lost to the Patriots. They was on the road, but still, did that Patriots team look like it was ready to beat anybody 3 weeks ago? No. So, you know, that's not endearing to them. They also should have lost to the Giants with Tyrod Taylor. They had to survive by the skin of their teeth and an uncalled penalty with the Giants at the 1-yard line trying to go ahead for a game-winning score. So, yeah, that's not what you want to do. The Chargers, another team that inexplicably will not talk about its head coach, despite they have the quarterback. They have Justin Herbert, and they still can't get out of their own way. They're 2-4. The Broncos 2-5. You know, that's the Saints are probably kind of bummed that they actually won this week. You know, the AFC North is interesting. I think the Steelers are a complete fraud at 4-2. They're a -24 in a point differential.
Ugh.
They're 4-2. Somehow, in the 2 games they've lost, they have allowed more points than, like, the games they won. The 4 games they won. Like, the difference, how does that happen? Anyway, someone asked the Vikings. But yeah, so, I mean, there's not a lot of good teams in the NFL right now. And so if you're looking for a silver lining in terms of, like, it's a race to get better. People say that, and it's true. It's a race to get better, and the Saints should feel like they have a good chance to do that, right? Like, you just got to get out of your own way and play decent football, and hopefully they can do that. But
the AFC South has been a pain in the ass this year. And we just have the Colts left to deal with. But, man, none of the games, Titans, Texans, Jaguars, were easy at all.
No, and the Titans are bad, which, you know, now in hindsight, it's like, man, that 16-15 win or whatever it was looks a little less encouraging with the benefit of hindsight. But, you know, so let's look at the remaining games, right? So there's 10 games left. The Saints are 3-4. The number that you have to get to I think get into the playoffs without, you know, heartburn and waiting and hoping that teams help you out is 10. I think if you get to 10 wins, then you can sit there and be comfortable. Probably 9 wins if we're being honest. But we saw what happened at 9-8 a few years ago. If you leave yourself at 9-8, then you deserve what happens. Whatever happens to you, you earned it.
Right,
And
double
that's what
digits you should be in.
Yeah. 10 wins, I think, something crazy would have to happen, especially with the extra wild card. It was a little harder a few years back when you only had 2 wild cards. Now with 3, there's only so many wins to get. So you should be able to get in. So how do you get there from here? Well, you would have to go 7-3 the rest of the way, and that sounds daunting.
Yes, it does.
That's the one thing about playing on Thursday. When you win, that 10 days off feels great. When you lose, that is a long time to stew on some bad football, to chew on that, on that gristle that's not going to go down no matter how hard you try. You just got to feed it to the dog and move on to the rest of the steak. Anyway, that analogy is weird, but I think it works. So how do you get there? How do you get to 10 wins? Well, you got to win. You got very winnable games coming up, and you got a bye week in week 11. You got 3 weeks and then a bye. So you're 3-4. I think you got to win all 3. Personally, I think you could survive with 2-1. 1-2 is absolutely unacceptable. So
you can't do it.
I think you should go 3-3 in these matchups with the Vikings being kind of a wild card in terms of the Saints have always kind of struggled against the Vikings since Kirk Cousins has been there. Justin Jefferson theoretically could be back. That would be the first game. Yeah, he's on IR, but that would be the 5th week out. So he could theoretically be back for that game. I don't know if he will, but it's hard to gauge right now. And even if he does get back, that would be his first game back, probably on a pitch count of some kind. So, I mean, either way, the Vikings are not good. So you're going to face the Colts, Gardner Minshew, a guy that I think the Saints feel pretty confident against. He like every time the Saints face him, it seems like the week before he dominated, and then they show up and he just can't do anything. Like the Saints have probably single-handedly.
He got his good game out the system before the Saints.
Well, I think the Saints have single-handedly been the reason that he has not gotten a starting job. Like
Minshew mania has been squashed.
Well, I think I like Bobby calls him Uncle Rico, and I feel like that's pretty solid in terms of I can throw a ball over the mountains. But like in 2019, he was the talk of the town. Everyone loved him. And then they showed up in Jacksonville and won 13-6 with Teddy Bridgewater, and he looked terrible. And then it was just like, you know what? He's probably not the guy. And they move on. They eventually get Trevor Lawrence, and the rest, it is what it is. Go to 2022. And he goes out there and fills in for Jalen Hurts and, is blowing it up, against the Cowboys. I think they lost that game like 38-33, something like that. But he was on fire. And then the Saints show up the next week and win 20-10 in Philly with Andy Dalton at quarterback in a game that they kind of wanted to win because it would have clinched the division had they won. And instead they had to go out the next week and try to win again. And so you couldn't rest anybody. And then everyone's like, oh wait, yeah, that's the Gardner Minshew we know, the one that the Saints play. And so they should be able to do that again, right? Sometimes you just match up well against a certain quarterback. It's the inverse of Lamar Jackson, where like some teams just cannot handle him, and I think the Lions figured that out this week. But you should be able to win that game, right?
Hopefully, Lattimore can get another pick 6.
Hopefully. Then you had the Bears. Tyson Bagent.
Man, come on.
I mean, like he looked good against the. I actually don't know. I'm making that up. I didn't watch the game against the Raiders, but they did blow out the Raiders, so he couldn't have played terribly in terms of, if he's doing what Brock Purdy is doing for the 49ers, which is, not getting in the way of success, then that's good for a rookie, right? So I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time watching Tyson Bagent until he's the guy on the docket. But either way, Bears are bad. Backup quarterback. The guy I was worried about was Justin Fields because I think the Saints would have had a lot of problems with Justin Fields. And like, I'm sure Tyson Bagent is playing fine. You can't lose to Tyson Bagent. You can't. So you got to win that game. Then the Vikings. I'd like to think you could go up to Minnesota and win that game. If you win those first 2 games and you lose in Minnesota, I can live with it. But that is the minimum. You got to go 2-1, ideally 3-0. And if you can do that, you go into the bye and you look at the back end of it. And so, you looked at 7-3 to get to 10 wins. Now you just need 4-3 over your final 7 games. And that feels doable. So I think that what they do over this next stretch of games is massive. It is massive. And if you can't win these games against backups, just pack it in.
I was going to say, yeah, if you can't beat Minshew or the kid in Chicago, forget it.
Tyson Bagent from Shepherd.
Agent.
Saw him at the Senior Bowl.
Aha, another product from the Senior Bowl in the NFL.
Yeah, made in Mobile. But yeah, so then you come out. You
It's,
come out of
what you call Ronald Curry should know him well.
Yeah, he should. That's true. Good point. So yeah, and so if you can win those 3 games, which I mean that's a pretty big ask considering what we have watched the last 2 weeks. But if you can win those 3 games, then you come out of that and you can afford 3 losses the rest of the way. And so where are those losses, right? So despite what I said about the Lions, I think the Lions are still good. I don't know how top end good they are in terms of how they would match up against the Eagles and the 49ers, but I think that they are going to be a team that beats up on some of the bottom feeders. And right now the Saints feel like something of a bottom feeder. And they're like the Saints are the team that should beat the bad teams, and the Lions are the team that should beat the teams that beat the bad teams. Does that make sense?
The lines in the trenches are scary, offense and defensive line.
They can run the ball. Yeah, they didn't have David Montgomery this week, and I think that's a big part of why they were unable to sustain offense. But the offense was only part of the problem,
right?
Because they couldn't stop Lamar ever. But so I can bake in a loss to the Lions and feel okay about it. I can bake in a loss to the Rams on Thursday Night Football in LA and call that a schedule loss. And it's not because I think the Rams are fantastic, although I think they're playing better than a lot of people expected, given the state of their roster. Puka Nacua is apparently the truth. I don't know. Like Matt Stafford is the kingmaker for wide receivers. But
although Stafford's, I'm surprisingly not having that great of a season.
I'd be lying if I told you I followed the Rams that closely, but they're 3-4, and I think that's going to be a really tough game for the Saints to go out west and win on a short week. So,
plus it's the damn Rams.
Yeah, and the Rams always play the Saints tough, except for last year. But obviously Stafford got hurt midway through that game, and once that happened, it was over. But so I'm willing to bake that in as a loss and say that's just a schedule loss, and so that's your second one. And then I'd say probably. And then I'd say probably at the Falcons is going to be a tough one to win. Although you are coming out of the bye and getting that game. So if you tell me they lose one of the games to the Falcons, then I think that can be your third loss, and I feel okay about it. It's tough to sweep the division. The Falcons are not a bad team. Saints should feel like they match up pretty well against them. They should be able to stop the run. Hopefully, Bijan Robinson just keeps having headaches. That's mean. I shouldn't say that. That's what happened this week. He apparently had headaches, and that's why he wasn't ever touching the ball. But they won, so I guess they can't be too mad about it.
He's not on my fantasy team, so I could care less about him.
Yeah, everyone was mad about that. It's 100. It's such a stupid. Well, why did the team tell the fans? Why would the team tell the fans?
Right.
What is that? Why would that benefit them? So that the other team knew? No. There's very few advantages in terms of guys getting hurt or not being able to compete at the last second, and it's not that you let the other team know. So it's just like people in fantasy football were like, well, screw you. I spent a first round pick on Bijan Robinson and got 1 carry for 2 yards.
Womp womp.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to bake in one of those losses and say okay, that means that you would need to beat the Falcons once.
We got to start cooking up some W's.
Yeah, beat the Bucs in Raymond James, which you might say, well, it's a road game. Wouldn't you feel better about the home game? No, I actually think the Saints play better at Raymond James than they play in New Orleans. Why? I don't know. But even last year, they should have won that game. They were playing terribly last year, but they still should have won that game. They won 38-3. They won 9-0. Like this team, for whatever reason, loves going to Tampa and playing. They're going to Florida. If they played more games in Florida, if they played Jacksonville and Florida, they would have blown them out.
We're a Florida team.
Apparently, every time they go to Florida, they win. Oh, except they should have won last year. They didn't win in Tampa last year, but that would be out. We don't need to talk about that. So win against the Bucs on the road. You host the Giants, a team that seems like they're starting to figure it out. But I'd like to think you can beat that team.
I still have nightmares from Saquon's last game in the Dome.
Right. That's the only reason. But that team, it's funny. You can make a very valid argument that they should stay with Tyrod Taylor.
Absolutely.
But they won't. For the same reason the Saints aren't going to give up on Derek Carr.
Isn't that crazy, right? And maybe Derek like kind of knew that, and he's like, "Shit, I can't sit down with that shoulder issue. I have to play."
I don't know. But so there's the Giants, and then you have another game against the Panthers. So you should, I mean, no one should be losing to the Panthers. You cannot bake in a loss to the Panthers at home. You can't do that.
You got to worry at that point is Andy Dalton in, because that I'd worry more about him than Bryce Young.
I agree. But yeah, so in order to get to 10 wins, you would need to beat the Colts, the Bears, the Vikings, one of the games against the Falcons, the Panthers, the Giants, the Bucks on the road, and that's it. That's your 7 wins. And that would include losses, one to the Falcons, one to the Rams, one to the Lions. So like you can get there. It's still a path. It's a daunting path, but like that's what we talked about all year. Is the schedule is not domineering. It's not daunting. Like you should be able to win on some of these games, and you should be able to get on a run and get on a roll and play better. And maybe that's because they become the Chip Kelly Oregon offense where they just go tempo all the time. And I don't know, but it's the frustrating thing about the NFC South is almost like you almost wish that there was a 7-2 team, so you wouldn't constantly be looking. It was like, well, if only they can win their next 5 games, they'll be there. And it's like, damn it.
There's still hope thanks to the NFC South being the NFC South.
Well, and that's the annoying thing in terms of if you're one of these people that wishes that this team would make some more drastic decisions. That's what prevents you from doing that, because you can't do that when you are in contention. You can't bail on a season where you win 2 games in a row and you're the favorite. And that's frustrating, but that's the reality.
And you still have 2 games left against the current division leader.
Yeah. And the Falcons are not exactly blowing anyone out of the water.
No, it's a lot of no good, terrible football we're in for.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we just set up this whole schedule and we talked about the opponents that are coming up. But at the end of the day, to me, it's the Saints versus themselves. Like, I don't even care who's the opponent. I don't care who their quarterback is. If this team can't figure its own shit out, they're going to lose. So
you can't field goal a team to death.
Well, the sad thing is you probably can in today's NFL, but
if we make them,
yeah, right. You need the field goals to go in for that to happen. But that's all I got. Anything else you want to hit before we go?
No, man. I'm just starting to think about Christmas gifts already, and I'm hoping for a better offensive output just in general from this team. I can't go into the another year of depressing no playoff football. We got to get to the postseason at least. Playoffs, double digits, man. I'm the 10-win train.
Playoffs.
I'm just trying to win a game.
Playoffs. We're just trying to win a game.
He was in the press box.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like he's there a good bit. He does the post game for the Fox, for the Fox.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Jim Mora was at every home game or not, but he was definitely there for this one.
My tracker that I put on him a few years ago stopped working, so I don't know. I don't know his whereabouts at most times. There is a funny Jim Morris story that Fletcher Mackle told me, and he was asleep in the back of the car, and he's an old guy, right? He's an old guy, and he's just been asleep for a while, and they're like Jim, and he wouldn't wake up, and they're like, oh no,
oh shit,
did he die? And they're like shook him, like, hey Jim. He's like, what the fuck do you want to try to sleep? And I shouldn't be telling Fletcher stories, but at the same time, like, that's such a Jim Mora. Like, like I can picture that so perfectly. Like, God damn, leave me alone.
I'm trying to get some nap in here.
Right, it's just an old guy. He's like, I'm tired. Let me sleep.
Right.
I'm like, sorry, we were just making sure you weren't dead. Anyway, all right, I'll probably cut that out. Anyway, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Thanks for commiserating with us. Hopefully things turn around. It sure would be nice. It seems like so long ago that I was able to have fun in the second half of a Saints season, because it has been. Because I don't even count COVID, because nothing about that season was fun.
We're not even happy about back-to-back 300-yard passing games, and that should be interesting, and it's like meh.
Right. If you had told me in like week 2, it'd be like, what if in week 6 and 7, Derek Carr has 600 something yards passing? You think you're gonna be mad about it? And I'd be like, no, why?
No, why would
How
I?
could that have possibly gone badly? And then
Right.
it did. So yeah, we'll find out. But yeah, so we'll be back on Wednesday. We'll record on Wednesday, post an episode on Thursday, kind of previewing or looking at the injury report and that comes out and kind of getting ready for what to expect in week 8. And on Friday, we'll have a preview with someone from the Colts universe. Not sure who it is yet, but we'll find someone, get a good preview at you. So as always, thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe. Hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Let us know what you think on Apple Podcasts, whatever. Review, rate, subscribe. Follow Steve at Steve Geller, WWL. Check out WWL.com for all the latest news, notes, analysis, all that good stuff. I've gotten really good at saying WWL real fast. Have you noticed?
WW.
WWL. WWW. WWW. Rub-a-dub in the tub on WWL. The trick is to just say WW. It's not WWL. It's WWL. Like if you spelled it, it'd be like DUBADUBAELLL. WWL.
WWL.
Yeah. But that just takes too long. You're always rushing against the clock and you're like, I have 3 seconds. How do I say so fast?
WWL.
WWL. Okay, anyway. Thanks everyone for listening. This is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat?
Let's go.
Saints. Yeah. Peace, y'all. Be easy.